I just want to do God's will.
What you're seeking is a blessing from God.
You must expect a miracle.
You have the power of choice.
Believe on the Lord Jesus Christ.
Welcome to Life Today Live. I'm Randy Robinson. Good to have you guys watching this today. And this is going to be a tough one to watch in some ways. I think perhaps the worst thing ever is the abuse of a child. You know, I think the average normal non-psychotic person would agree. Yeah, abusing a child is wrong, and it's not just wrong, it's just evil, you know? Unfortunately, today's guest faced such abuse, but she has spent a lot of time regaining her voice, taking the power back that man stole from her in many ways, and really just healing. And it's a long journey, and you're going to hear that journey today. And so I appreciate you being here. You can hit share, like, follow, subscribe, wherever you're watching, whatever you can hit. And that would be great. Cindy Arevalo is my guest, and she has a book out. It's called Living in Silence. And we'll talk about that aspect of it, because that is obviously, it's just part of the prison that evil puts people in, is that silence. But she is no longer living in silence, and I respect her for that, because that's not easy, and she is speaking out, so you get to hear her. Cindy, thank you for taking the time to share your story with our audience today on Life Today Live.
Thank you so much for having me on today, Randy. Thank you for the intro also.
I just take us back to wherever you want to start. You know, I've read, the notes that the publisher provides. I've read some of the news stories about your abuser. But take us back to where you want to start and kind of walk us through so we can understand what you've been through and what we're facing in our society.
Yes, definitely. Well, I want to go back to when I was 14. At the time, I was somebody who was very shy, very insecure, very naive, didn't have a lot of experience with life, and definitely I felt like I was behind the curveball when it came to boys. I had never had my first boyfriend at the time, never kissed a boy yet. And I always felt very sheltered, in a sense of, I know my parents were doing it to protect me, but at the same time, I felt that if they would have been able to tell me, you know, if somebody ever says this to you or does something to you, please say something, because that's not right. It's not normal. And a lot of times I think that they unfortunately didn't have the right tools to teach me or to guide me in that aspect or in that sense. And I remember when I met my abuser, I was 14, I was in middle school. He was a substitute teacher at the time. And then he got hired as a permanent PE teacher. And I started building a relationship with him where he started telling me how pretty I was, telling me that I was mature for my age, that I was smart, that I was beautiful, that I in other words, he was seeing me. I felt seen and I felt heard. He was really good at listening to me, really good at talking to me, really good at being a friend and being there for me, if that makes sense. And that was something that I didn't have at home. My parents worked long hours just to make ends meet. So I hardly had the time to speak with them. And then when I did, they were just so exhausted from work that they didn't want to really even have a conversation with me because they were just too tired from working. And I always felt lonely. And the person that I could turn to was my abuser, was Kip Arnold, who I felt comfortable with, who I thought I can talk to him about anything and he'd be there for me, because that's exactly how he made me feel. He made me feel that he would be there for me for anything.
Can I ask a question here? Because was any of that, you think, genuine, or was he grooming the entire time?
I believe he was grooming me the entire time. Looking back now, I can see that it wasn't the first time that he had done something like that. And he was very comfortable. The way he approached our conversations, the way that I felt even manipulated by him by not being able to speak freely about it to anybody, to any of my friends, because he used to tell me, if you tell somebody, you're going to get in trouble and I'm going to get in trouble, and you wouldn't want that for anybody, right? And I would say, of course not, because to me, that was the only true friend that I really had outside of my peers at school. I felt like I could really confide in him. And not just that, but in a sense, he was almost a father figure to me, because my dad was home, but he was not home, if that makes sense. He was always working, always mentally checked out, stressed out about bills. And this man was there for me.
Mm. Someone online watching right now is saying this same thing happened to me. You mentioned one thing I didn't see in the news stories is were there others that came forward besides you?
I would say I did have another friend come forward. For privacy purposes, I can't disclose their names,
Sure.
But because of her, I had the courage to come forward and tell my story.
Okay. Yeah. And if anybody hears one thing, if you're in that situation, have the courage. Let Cindy give you that courage today. What transpired from there? You start with a friendship that you think is a friendship, but obviously is not. Where did it go from there?
From there, it led to a crush. So then here's this man who's paying attention to me, who sees me for who I am, who I think genuinely cares about me. And I start developing a crush for him. And sure enough, he tells me that he also has a crush on me. And at the time, I'm an 8th grader and I'm in middle school. I'm 14 years old. But he tells me, I can talk to you on the phone, but you can't tell anybody. You can't tell anybody that I like you. You can't tell anybody that you like me, because we're both going to get in trouble and we wouldn't want that. So I understood that from the beginning. My sister actually overheard a conversation of ours right before I hung up the phone. And she actually heard his voice. She didn't hear the full conversation, but she heard the end enough to hear his voice. She confronted me and asked me, who was that? And I said, oh, it was a friend. She said, that is not a boy. That is a man. And I said, no, it's a boy. And she's like, no, that is a man. So she told my mother, and the way she approached it, instead of having a talk with me directly saying, something isn't right, who is this, please talk to me, it was more of an accusation in the form of, could you believe her? She's talking to a man, how disgusting. And my mom, of course, didn't have the right tools. So it's like a form of punishment in a sense of, I can't believe you, you're disgracing the family, and no, you're not allowed to talk to him. But I don't have an explanation as to why, what's wrong with it. And that's the end. So my sister calls him and she threatens him, telling him, if you ever call the house again, I'm going to report you to the police, and stay away from my sister. So my sister felt content with that. My mother felt content with how she addressed it, and that's how it stayed. But the twist here was that later on that night, my mother asked me, so who is this man? And of course, I have the biggest crush on him at the time. So I'm gushing over him. I'm like, oh, he's a great man. He's a great teacher. He genuinely cares about me. He helps me with my homework. And she's like, oh, okay, a teacher. And what is he? I said, he's a white man. And she's like, oh, okay, white. And then where does he live? I'm like, he lives in a boat. And she's like, oh, okay, a boat. So he must make money, right? I'm like, I don't know. At 14, I'm not concerned about anybody's income. Then she's like, okay. She's like, well, I give you permission to speak to him on the phone. But just don't tell your dad. Don't tell your sister. And who knows, maybe later on it might turn into something romantic. And she gave me an example of a friend of hers from El Salvador who met a bus driver who was much older than her, and she got married with him. So she's like, who knows, that might be the same case for you. And by her giving me permission, it was his green light. He felt very accessible to me, where he said, okay, if mom's aware of me and she's okay with me talking to you, then in other words, he felt just free.
Yeah. How old was he at the time? Do you know? Approximately.
He must have been in his mid 40s at the time. He used to tell me he was 37, and then I caught on when every year was 37. I'm like, no, how how old are you really? He didn't really want to tell me, but I assumed he was in his mid-40s.
So you're. I don't want to sound cruel, but was your mother naive, or was she not given all the facts? I mean, it baffles me that a mother of a 14, 15-year-old would encourage a relationship with a PE teacher in his 40s.
Yes, I do believe my mother was naive. She didn't have the greatest childhood growing up. She actually had a very harsh childhood growing up. And she didn't have many tools in her life. She didn't have somebody pouring into her, telling her that she was loved. She was actually orphaned for some time. And it was just a very hard upbringing that she had. And I do talk about it in the book. So there's more details about it in the book as well. Yeah. But she didn't know about the abuse. As time went on, she had no idea that he was abusing me. Okay.
Now, I want to be delicate here, but how do you phrase it when you discuss the abuse and what that entailed?
It was horrendous. So outside of sexual abuse and trauma, I can say it was also verbal abuse. It was blackmailing. It was gaslighting. It was manipulation. And of course, it was rape and it was sexual abuse.
Oh, my God. How long? And did that go on, and how did it end?
From the time that I was 14 up until I was 19.
Oh my!
So how it actually ended was I'm now in a junior city college. I'm 19, and I happened to get pregnant by my then boyfriend, who is now my husband. And he is furious. He is upset. He tells me, "You need to get an abortion." I said, "No." He said, "Yes, you do. You need to get an abortion." And he's planning a meeting for me to get an abortion. He wants to set up a date to get me an abortion. And I said no. So he's really pushing now from, because I go a lot into details in the book, he went from blackmailing me with money to now pushing an abortion, if that makes sense. And I remember clearly that I made a decision within me that I was not going to let him do that. He had already done so much harm in my life, done so many evil things to me, that I thought, no, how can he have a say to an unborn child? And he used to tell me, please do yourself a favor and do that child a favor, and don't bring it into this world, because what are you going to provide for it? And what is your husband, well, my husband now, going to provide for it? And he's like, no, just please do it a favor. And I ran away from home. I didn't tell my parents that I was pregnant yet. I didn't feel safe coming forward to them either to let them know I'm pregnant. And I left with my husband's family, and we were living there for some time. And I broke my phone. I didn't hear from him anymore. But the crazy thing is that when I came forward during our sting operations, he tells me, I never stopped looking for you. And that disturbed me to my core. And he wanted to know information about the baby. So he actually mentally kept track of my pregnancy. And he told me the baby must be this old. And sure enough, he was right. He said, I never forgot about you. I'm here for you. And he wanted to creep back into my life.
Yeah, creep is the right word. You said sting operation. Tell me about that.
Okay, so I'm coming forward. I say my story multiple times. Of course, I don't have any evidence of what I'm saying. It's just a story that I'm saying. And the detective tells me, you know what, Cindy, I believe you, but I'm so sorry, we don't have any evidence. He's like, the only way we can get some evidence is if you talk to him. And that was the last thing I wanted to do. I'm like, no, I don't want to see him. I don't want to hear him. Sure. They're like, that's the only way. So they said, we're going to give you a phone. We're going to guide you on what to say. We're going to record everything. We're here with you. I thought, okay, that I feel safer that way. So sure enough, I get on the phone with him. I start talking to him about our fondest moments in life. And right away he catches on and he says, I think that you're with the police, aren't you? You're turning me in, aren't you? And I'm like, no, why would you say that? And he's like, well, why are you bringing this up now? I said, if I would have turned you in, don't you think I would have done it sooner? And he would think about it like, okay, I think you're right. And then he started getting more and more comfortable opening up about certain things in the past, and then certain things about my current future at the time. And it didn't take long for him to just feel that he was being eaten up inside. So on one of the lasting operations that I had with him, he tells me, begging me, please, I'm begging you, if you did turn me in, I need to know, because I can't go to prison. I would rather die than to go to prison. I feel like my past demons have caught up to me, and my daughter can't know about this. There's no way. I can't live like this. Like, please tell me. And the detectives and the officers actually ran into him at a gas station in the city of Lakewood, because they were already onto him. They were watching him. He hadn't been home in some time. He wasn't comfortable going to his house. It's like he already knew, I'm being watched. Yeah. And they went on a police pursuit, which led to 2 pit maneuvers, and he got away on both. And there's a helicopter following him, and he probably sees no way out, so he decides to jump off the freeway. He lands on a tree, and he's such a big man that they couldn't just open the door and get him out. They had to just open up the whole roof of the car and airlift him out. And I see this on the news as it's happening, and you just see him cover his face. He's so embarrassed, but yet he's saying, I'm not guilty.
Wow. Now, wow, there's so much there. It's weird because on the one hand, I see a man who is deeply troubled and deeply tormented, and it just points to the whole fallen nature of people in a way that just screams for salvation. I'm curious, where was God in this whole thread for you? Were you raised in a Christian family at all? Did you have any awareness of God? What's going on that front?
So I was actually raised Catholic, and my mother and my sister went to a Christian church. They gave their life to Christ, and they started taking me along with them to church. I remember from being 7 years old up until 14, 16, we would go to church, but I always felt forced to go to church. It wasn't really a personal decision. Sure. Same with my baptism. I felt forced to be baptized. And I ran away from God for the longest time because I didn't feel worthy. I didn't feel like a good person. I felt ashamed, embarrassed. I had a lot of guilt that I was carrying around, guilt that should have never been mine to begin with. Yeah. And I remember that when I would even go to church, I didn't want to be there. I felt so uncomfortable because I felt unworthy to be there. I knew who God was, but I didn't have a relationship with him, if that makes sense. Oh, and yeah. I was afraid to, because I thought, how could someone like him look at somebody like me and forgive me and accept me and love me? And that's what I ran away from for the longest time. I actually gave my life to Christ in September of 2019. I got baptized in February of 2020. And to me, that was the most beautiful thing ever. It was my freedom. It was my peace, my everlasting peace. Because for years I struggled with anxiety, with depression, with suicidal thoughts, with just so much baggage. And I went to therapy and it helped me so much, but it only took me so far. And finding Christ and giving him everything, all the ugliness, all the trauma, the depression, the anxiety, just everything, and leaving it at his feet and not taking it back. That was my freedom. That was my salvation. That was my peace. That now I can talk about what happened to me with so much peace and confidence. And some people look at me, we're like, how can you even forgive him? How can you talk about this now and not break down in tears? And it's because I feel that peace of the Lord in me. I feel his courage. I feel his grace, his love over me. When I ran away from him for so long, and the day that I met him and accepted him, he met me with the opposite. He met me with his love, with his grace. He met me with everything that I thought was the opposite. And he hugged me, he held me, He accepted me as I was, and he worked, and he still works tremendously in me to this day.
I can tell that that's genuine, and I can tell that you got beyond a religious environment, which can, in some, make you feel unworthy, because we all are, in a sense. But what you're saying is exactly the nature of Christ. We all know John 3:16. God loved the world; He gave His only begotten Son. Whoever believes in Him have everlasting life. John 3:17, right there. God didn't come into the world to condemn the world. He didn't come here to condemn us, but so that we might be saved. And that condemnation that you felt was coming, if you got in God's presence, it's beautiful, because you found just the opposite. You found the salvation and the love and the acceptance. And now we talk about this idea of holiness, which really it's wholeness. And it hasn't been that long. I mean, we're talking a couple of years now, since your baptism at least. Are you walking out that daily walk towards wholeness, meaning just pointing yourself in the right direction? Because we can't really do it ourselves, other than just say, Lord, I'm going to trust you and let you do it. But are you feeling a sense of wholeness come maybe to you for the first time?
Yes, I do. I honestly, every day I ask him, excuse my dog in the background, I ask him to let it be his will that be done, not mine, but his will. So even on interviews like today, I get on my knees, I pray, I ask him to use me as his vessel, that we're able to share his testimony. I call it his testimony, because I look back now, and where I thought I was lonely, I was emptiest, he was still there in control. He led me with the right people. He led me with my attorney, with the detectives, with my friend who helped me come forward, with my husband who has been my support and my rock that helped me get out of my situation, with my first daughter who he sent, and I call her my angel because of her. It was what got me out of leaving him for good. Yeah. And of course, the therapist and the friend that prayed over me to accept Christ. And it's like he was in control then, and he's still in control now. He had a plan then, he has a plan now. And I pray that he uses our testimony to be of something that will reach and impact thousands upon thousands of people that are currently still hurting, that are living in silence and depression, guilt, anxiety, and to let them know that they are not alone. Yeah. Especially with God by their side.
Yeah. And honestly, if you can just help one, that will be tremendous.
Yes.
So, okay, I have a couple of questions regarding your abuser, because I read some articles on his sentencing and things like that. But I want to show people the book, again, Living in Silence, because some of you need to get this. It'll help you. It'll help you a lot. It's available wherever you get books. Someone online, though, has a quick question, and I will honor that. She's asking, how many years did you sort of run from God?
I can honestly say to my awareness, from 14 up until I was 28.
Okay. Wow. Contrast, you kind of have already, but I'm just curious, contrast how you feel on a daily basis now that you've stopped running and you've let God love you, with how you felt during those 14 years.
I have peace, complete peace. I feel free. I don't feel binded to him anymore, attached to him, attached to that trauma anymore. I just feel free, if that makes sense. And don't get me wrong, sometimes there are some hard days. We're all human at the end of the day, but now I know I take it to the Lord.
Yeah.
I don't run from him anymore.
It's right there in Scripture. It's for freedom that Christ came, and I love it. I absolutely love it. God bless you. So I did read that, and you name him, and I think it's fair when you read the news articles from LA, you read about Kip Arnold, and then you read about the unknown victims. Well, here you are saying, yeah, I'm one of those, which is kind of scary and kind of big, but I think it's powerful. I'm curious though, because if the news accounts I read were accurate, he was sentenced to 4 years in jail for his crimes, which to me seems really low.
Yes, he did. He was sentenced for 4 years, and with good behavior, he got out in 2.5.
Okay. Everybody watching right now is a little bit freaking out, I think. We hear about California's lenient sentencing at times. How do you respond to that? Because I'm not you, and I'm kind of angry about that. How do you feel?
Yes, I personally think that it's unfair because it's not even the time frame of his abuse towards me.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, I do leave it in God's hands. He obviously got out a couple of years ago already. He does have to register as a sex offender for life. He can't ever work in another school again. And you know what? I do wish him the best. I genuinely do. And, it might seem crazy to some people, but I don't know. It took a lot for me to realize it actually through a movie. I don't know if you've seen the movie The Shack.
Mm-hmm.
When I saw that movie, I felt like a ton of bricks hit me because there's a scene there where it seems like the father has to be the judge toward two of his children. And he has to save one and condemn the other one to hell. Mm-hmm. But they're both his children, and he can't bring himself to do that. So he says, take me. Which to me, that was what Jesus Christ did for us, did for the world, to save us. So at the end of the day, I thought, you know what? I've been a pretty good judge. I've been telling God, please forgive me. But no, don't forgive him because you know what he's done. So don't forgive that one. And I've been a good judge at that. And I thought it's about time that I let that go and I give that to the Father, because at the end of the day, he is his creation. And I do hope that he finds Christ, that he gets redeemed, that he turns away from his sins and starts living a new life.
That attitude, that response can only come from God, because, and it's human nature. You go, okay, that's not justice. I got reason to be angry. But you're right. Do we trust God's justice or man's justice or our own justice? And at the end of the day, you got to realize my justice is short. And it's imperfect, and certainly the law has demonstrated that it's imperfect as well. And so, yeah, I mean, to say I trust God's judgment, that's a sign of maturity, spiritual maturity. And they say that forgiveness is really for the forgiver, not so much the one who committed, the offense. It's one thing to say all these things. It's another thing for you to live it. I sense a sense of peace on your end and resolution, and let it go. I mean, is that part of the freedom too, the forgiveness and the trusting God for the justice rather than carrying that sense of injustice around yourself? Is that a part of your freedom?
Yes, definitely. And more than anything, it's the courage and the peace that the Lord gives me, because I know on my own, it's like, no, I can't. And I say it because I've done this many times in the past where I said, okay, I forgive him. But then I would get all angry again. And I thought, no, that's not fair. That's not right. Yeah. And now that I gave it to the Lord, left it to him, didn't take it back, I have the Lord's peace and the Lord's courage, the Lord's strength to do that. The Lord's mercy to do that, because I know out of my own flesh, I would just be like, no, I can't.
Sure.
I can't do that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and last thing before we kind of wrap it up, with your parents, because, I get it, working hard, trying to provide for the family, a lot of naivety. We all assume this happens to other people, not to our own children. How is that relationship now with you and your parents?
Now with my parents, I could say that I forgave them too, because for a long time I was very angry and bitter at them, because when I did come forward and they were aware of it, they still didn't respond in a positive manner, which was very hurtful because they are my parents. And I also struggled with that for years. And again, it was through Christ that I was able to forgive them and to not hold anything accountable to them. I can now look back and just see that they both had very harsh upbringings. They both lived in poverty. They both just struggled a lot in life, and they didn't have the adequate tools. They still don't. And I don't hold that against them.
Wow. Cindy, God's doing some huge things in your life, and in a fairly short amount of time, 2-3 years is that's a lot. And so I celebrate what God's doing in you, and I just pray that He would continue to use you in your peace and freedom to extend that to others. What do you hope? Where do you want to see Cindy Arevalo in 5 years?
I want to see her having an organization or being plugged into an organization to help victims of crime, to help survivors, to lead more people to Christ. That's my priority. It's just to win more souls to the kingdom, to populate the kingdom. Because at the end of the day, we are all sinners. We are all lost. We are all empty. And the only one that can fill in all those voids is our Lord and Savior. And He's the only one that can save us at the end of the day. So that's my main goal. My main goal is to populate His kingdom, work for His kingdom.
Okay. You are on a track for blessing. Yeah, and I think that is beautiful. Thank you so much. Is there anything else you want to mention before I let you go? I know you're active on social media. Let people know about that. If there's a way that they can support you, please tell us. But what else do people need to know before I let you go today?
My social media is for Instagram. It's _Cindy_Arevalo. And you can follow me on Instagram. I do have the link to my books there also. So you can click on the link and it'll take you directly to Amazon. My books are sold on Amazon. I also have an audiobook, which is sold on Audible. You type in Living in Silence by Cindy Arevalo and it'll come right back up. But more than anything, I would like to say that if you are a survivor yourself, you are not alone. You didn't bring this upon yourself. You weren't asking for it. You weren't dressed too provocatively. You weren't doing anything to bring the abuse onto you. And that abuse is not something that you should carry. It is not your burden to carry alone. I pray that you leave that to Christ, that you surrender it all to Him. If you haven't given your life to Christ, I pray that you receive Him, that you let Him into your heart, that you let Him make a new creation in you. And if you have received Christ in your life and maybe just kind of distance yourself, I pray that you recommit your life to Christ, that you accept Him in your heart again, that you seek Him, that you worship Him, that you read your Bible daily, that you just talk to Him daily. More than anything, build that relationship with Him like a good friend. Have Him close to you. Because at the end of the day, whatever you're going through in life, whether you're a survivor or not, He is the only one that can get you through life.
That is so powerful. Cindy, God, I love what God's doing in you and the fact that you're surrendered to Him. It's a beautiful thing. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Randy.
If this has touched you, and especially if you are involved in a ministry or women's shelter or anything related to that, I would encourage you to go buy a bunch of Cindy's books. It will help support her and give them away because it will help the people that need to hear it. And if you don't have the money for that, I bet you know someone who does, and just take that step and say, hey, would you buy 20 of these books so I can give them away, at this place and help people? Just go out there and do it, and it'll help all the way around. Just my idea for the day. I appreciate you guys being here. Hit share, hit like, subscribe or follow if you haven't, and support what Cindy's doing. And we'll see you again next time here on Life Today Live.
If we have providence to guide us, it is God's mercy. The same for you, the same for every man, Jew and Gentile and Mohammedan, whether they believe it or not. We float on this vast, limitless sea of divine mercy.